was 1897. The great North Country, virtually untouched and unknown, was about to enter the history books and create an excitement that would send a calling all over the world. Gold had been discovered in Alaska and the Yukon. Mountains of it, rivers full of it, and shorelines that glittered with gold. Unto this land there came a young writer that would capture the love, misery, solitude, and imagination of every adventurer that would ever travel into the mighty North from that day on till the end of all time. Some say he created the blasted North with his pen. Not so. The deep valleys and towering peaks will always be there, just like the great bard wrote about them. His name was Robert Service, and his style of writing fit the land like a glove. The lure of gold brought hordes of characters and would-be miners from every corner of the earth. Some were tough when they came. All were tough that stayed. The land and the men that trod the fabled trails of the North were wilder than any writer could ever tell it. But Robert Service gave it all a purpose. He wrote heart and forgiveness into the raging storm, and he wrote humor into the hardships of the trail. Today, 100 years later, they say the gold has all been mined out of Alaska and the Yukon. But is it really gone? Or is it just the passing of those early day tough ones that found it? Let's journey now back into time and relive one of Robert Service's greatest poems, The Spell of the Yukon. I wanted the gold, and I sought it. I scrabbled and mucked like a slave. Was it famine or scurvy? I fought it. I hurled my youth into a grave. I wanted the gold, and I got it. Came out with a fortune last fall. Yet somehow life's not what I thought it. And somehow the gold isn't all. No, there's the land. Have you seen it? It's the cussedest land that I know. From the big dizzy mountains that screen it to the deep death-like valleys below. Some say God was tired when he made it. Some say it's a fine land to shun. Maybe, but there's some as would trade it for no land on earth. And I'm one. You come to get rich, a damn good reason. And you feel like an exile at first. You hate it like hell for a season. And then you are worse than the worst. It grips you like some kinds of sinning. It twists you from foe to a friend. It seems it's been since the beginning. It seems it will be to the end. I've stood in some mighty-mouthed hollow that's plumb full of hush to the brim. I've watched the big husky sun wallow in crimson and gold and grow dim, till the moon sets the pearly peaks gleaming, and the stars tumbled out neck and crop. And I've thought that I surely was dreaming, with a piece of the world piled on top. The summer, no sweeter was ever. The sunshiny woods all athrill. The grayling a-leap in the river. The bighorn asleep on the hill. The strong life that never knows harness. The wilds where the caribou calls. The freshness, the freedom, the farness. Oh God, how I'm stuck on it all. The winter, the brightness that blinds you. The white land locked tight as a drum. The cold fear that follows and finds you. The silence that bludgeons you dumb. The snows that are older than history. The woods where the weird shadows slant. The stillness, the moonlight, the mystery. I've bade 'em goodbye, but I can't. There's a land where the mountains are nameless, and the rivers all run God knows where. There are lives that are erring and aimless, and death that just hangs by a hair. There are hardships that nobody reckons. There are valleys unpeopled and still. There's a land, oh, it beckons and beckons. I want to go back, and I will. They're making my money diminish, and I'm sick of the taste of champagne. Thank God, now that I'm skinned to a finish, I'll pike to the Yukon again. I'll fight, and you bet it's no sham fight. It's hell, and I've been there before. And it's better than city life by a damn sight. So for me, it's the Yukon once more. There's gold, and it's haunting and haunting. It's luring me on as of old. Yet it isn't the gold that I'm wanting, so much as just finding the gold. It's the great big broad land way up yonder. It's the forests where silence has lease. It's the beauty that thrills me with wonder, and it's the stillness that fills me with peace. Wherever gold was found, a town sprung up. Saloons, dance halls, theaters, trading posts, and tent camps. Nome, during its heyday, had 48 saloons open around the clock and 52 lawyer shops. Skagway was Soapy Smith's town, and yes, you can find his tombstone right today among Skagway's finest. Some say he's still the most powerful man in town. This was the jumping-off place for the gold-rich Klondike, deep in the heart of the Yukon. Perhaps Dawson City was the most famous of all the mining towns, and Robert Service once wrote that no place on earth in such a short span hustled more souls to hell. It was here in Dawson City and Whitehorse that he wrote and created one of the most infamous characters that ever stole a woman's heart.
Pardon me, ma'am. 1,000 pleasures. Haven't we met someplace before, ma'am?
Join us now as we relive that century-old yarn, the shooting of dangerous Dan McGrew. A bunch of the boys were whooping it up in the Malamute Saloon. The kid that handles the music box was hitting the jag-time tune. Back at the bar in a solo game sat dangerous Dan McGrew. And watching his luck was his light of love, the lady that's known as Lou. When out of the night, which was 50 below, and into the din and the glare, there stumbled a miner fresh from the creeks, dog dirty, and loaded for bear. He looked like a man with a foot in the grave, and scarcely the strength of a louse. Yet he tilted a poke of dust on the bar, and he called for drinks for the house. There was none could place the stranger's face, though we searched ourselves for a clue. But we drank his health, and the last to drink was Dangerous Dan McGrew. There's men that somehow just grip your eyes and hold them hard like a spell. And such was he, for he looked to me like a man who had lived in hell. With a face most hair and the dreary stare of a dog whose day is done, as he belted down shots of barbed wire hooch, and the drops fell one by one. Then I got to figuring who he was and wondering what he'd do. And I turned my head, and there watching him was the lady that's known as Lou. His eyes went rubbering round the room. He seemed in kind of a daze, till at last that old piano fell in the way of his wandering gaze. The ragtime kid was having a drink, and there was no one else on the stool. So the stranger stumbles across the room and flops down there like a fool. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt, he sat, and I saw him sway. Then he clutched the keys with his taloned hands. My God, but that man could play. Were you ever out in the great alone when the moon was awful clear and the icy mountains hemmed you in with a silence you could almost hear, with only the howl of a timber wolf, and you camped there in the cold, a half-dead thing in a stark dead world, clean mad for the muck called gold? While high overhead, green, yellow, and red, the north light swept in bars. Then you've a hunch what the music means. Hunger, the night, and the stars. And hunger not of the belly kind that's banished with bacon and beans, but the gnawing hunger of lonely men for a home and all that it means. For a fireside far from the cares that are, four walls and a roof above, but oh so crammed full of cozy joy and crowned with a woman's love, a woman dearer than all the world and true as heaven is true. God, how ghastly she looks through her rouge, the lady that's known as Lou. Then all of a sudden, the music changed, so soft that you could scarcely hear. But you felt that your life had been looted clean of all that it once held dear. That someone had stolen the woman you loved, that her love was a devil's lie, that your guts were gone, and the best for you was to crawl away and die. 'Twas the crowning cry of a heart's despair, and it saddened you through and through. I guess I'll make it a spread misere, said Dangerous Dan McGrew. The music almost died away. Then it burst like a pent-up flood, and it seemed to say, repay, repay, and my eyes were blind with blood. The thought came back of an ancient wrong, and it stung like a frozen lash, and the lust awoke to kill, and the music stopped with a crash. The stranger turned, and his eyes they burned in a most peculiar way. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt, he sat, and I saw him sway. Then his lips went into a kind of grin, and he spoke, and his voice was calm. Boys, says he. "You don't know me, and none of you care a damn. But I want to state, and my words are straight, and I'll bet my poke they're true. There's a one of you that's a hound of hell. And that one is Dan McGrew." And I ducked my head, and the lights went up, and two guns blazed in the dark. A woman screamed, and the lights went up, and two men lay stiff and stark. Pitched on his head and pumped full of lead was dangerous Dan McGrew, while the man from the creeks lay clutched to the breast of the lady that's known as Lou. Well, these are the simple facts of the case, and I guess I ought to know. They say the stranger was crazed with hooch, and I'm not denying it's so. I'm not so wise as the lawyer guys, but strictly between us two, the woman that kissed him and pinched his poke was the lady that's known as Lou.
Sure he did.
Yeah, that hidden ace didn't help him any.
During the gold rush era, 10,000 miles of trails were developed in Alaska and at least that many more in the Yukon. The Trail of 98 from Skagway to the Klondike was perhaps the most famous. The trail from Sheep Creek to Nome was 1,000 miles of pure hell. And a century later, the famous dog team race called the Iditarod symbolizes not just the greatest race left on Earth, but it's really a tribute to those long ago giants of the trail, both men and dogs that hauled freight to Nome during the dead cold of winter. As the gold rush faded into history, so did most of the trails. Oh, it's true, some of the trails became highways, and some are still out there hidden from view, just beyond where modern adventurers travel. But there is one trail, one journey that Robert Service made immortal for all time. And no trip to the mighty north or a story about the cold would be complete without hearing the cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was the night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. Though he'd often say, in his homely way, that he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold. Through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close, the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but my only concern was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed, and the stars o'erhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me and, "Cap," says he, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking you won't refuse my last request." He seemed so low that I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of moan, "It's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet, take me and dead, it's my awful dread of an icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains. A pal's last need is a thing to heed. So I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn. But God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh, and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. And before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee.
Sam, I promise you I'll keep my word.
There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried, horror-driven, with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, "You may tax your brawn and brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you to cremate those last remains." Now a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, while my lips were dumb, in my heart, how I cursed that load. In the long, long night, with no firelight, while the huskies round in a ring, they howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathe that thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. And on I went, though the dogs were spent, and the grub a-getting low.
Pull, you gotta pull.
The trail was bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin. Till I came to the marge of Lake LaBarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. And I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum. Then here, said I with a sudden cry, is my crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. Flames just soared, and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see. And I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in my friend Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. The heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And a greasy smoke and an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out, and they danced about, ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peep inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked. Then the door I opened wide, and there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heat of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see a mile, and he said,
Please, chap, please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you're going to let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, this is the first time I've been warned.
Well, there really are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge. I cremated Sam McGee. More than 100 years ago, the gold miners offloaded right here in Juneau and Skagway. They trekked on to Whitehorse, Dawson City, and the far corners of the Yukon in search for what was really and truly the thrill of a lifetime. Oh, it's true. Some said they'd come only for the gold. And others said they came in hopes of starting a new life in the great big new land. Over a century later, they're still arriving here for the same old reasons as way back then. The dream of a real adventure. The gold rush brought thousands and thousands to our borders to sink their pick into our mountains and dredge our streams. But only a few really found the yellow metal. Those who stayed and gave it a good look found much more than gold. They found the awesome, unforgettable beauty of the land, the same as those who come today. Down through the ages, the writings of Robert Service have always been the North Country's greatest ambassador. When he wrote about a trail, the trail was there, and it led to somewhere with a real purpose. He wrote about the all alone, where the weird shadows slant, and we've all bade them goodbye, but we can't. He wrote about the lure of the little voices, luring you on as of old. So if you're one of those that has heard the wilderness beckon, and if you're heading up to Alaska come spring, come just as excited and eager as a young child. Let this trip to Alaska and the Yukon be your journey back to the wild.